Welcome to another episode of the Erin Coupe Podcast. Today, we're going to dive into something that comes up all too often in corporate cultures and in leadership settings: avoiding difficult conversations and hoping that issues will just fade away. The truth is, they rarely do. Sweeping things under the rug when it comes to people issues does not make them go away. It just makes them bigger. It leads to more harm, frustration, and disengagement in the long run. So I want to just start with a simple truth. People issues require people to solve them. If you've worked with me in any capacity, you know that I've said this a million times. People problems cannot be fixed with finance adjustments or new strategies or the latest technology. This is especially relevant in corporate settings where creating a culture of openness and accountability is the foundation for addressing people matters efficiently and effectively. It is people that make up a business. We have to remind ourselves of this every single day. A company is nothing without its people, and yet so often the people matters are an afterthought or addressed only once problems become so big or exacerbated that they can no longer be ignored. Through my work with many leaders, I have often seen situations where difficult conversations are avoided, with some leaders being afraid of hurting someone's feelings or confusing emotional intelligence with excessive empathy. And I've seen other leaders at times just check out, disengaging from conversations altogether that really need to happen. In my own corporate experience, there were times when I wanted a change, but instead of addressing it with my boss, I would mentally check out. Sure, I showed up, I put in the hours, I was doing the work required, but I wasn't fully there. Instead of voicing my concerns or addressing my dissatisfaction and being honest about that, I instead just went through the motions. I did what was expected, but not at my maximum, at my minimum, just enough to get by and not be noticed or called out. And I know I'm not alone in this. I'm sure many of you listening have been there too. And if you haven't done this yourself, you've maybe had someone do this to you or notice this behavior from someone that reports to you or has in the past. Avoiding conversations like this that seem difficult and complex and complicated and hard to have only worsens workplace dynamics. It allows for tension and resentment to build within teams. Imagine you're on a team where one team member just isn't pulling their weight. Everyone notices, but nothing is done about it. The leader doesn't address the issue, and over time, others may begin to disengage themselves, feeling that their work isn't recognized. In fact, all too often, bad behaviors and lackluster performance even seem acceptable, and it affects others on the team drastically. What is the result of that? Well, morale plummets and resentment grows, not only toward that underperforming team member, but also toward the leader who's allowed it to continue unaddressed. When people issues go unaddressed, it erodes trust and productivity and creates a culture where people feel undervalued and unsupported. This happened to me in one of my previous roles, where a leader not only avoided addressing my feedback, but went so far as to discuss my concerns behind my back with others. Ultimately, he ended up treating me completely differently afterwards. And it was as if our relationship had become very transactional, when prior to that, I actually felt loyalty towards him. And I felt like we had a real relationship. I felt like he valued my contributions and had consistently asked for my feedback. And then it completely turned around. It became a very disingenuine relationship where he no longer asked for my feedback. He would actually not make eye contact with me. I mean, imagine being in a meeting with someone who used to look you in the eyes and ask you for feedback and ask for your thoughts and perspectives and opinions, who now just completely avoids you. That's what happened. This disengagement from my leader was both painful and demoralizing. And I ended up losing respect for him. Any sense of loyalty that I had evaporated. When a leader stops engaging with you, it creates anxiety and stress, and trust is immediately damaged. So, why do these tough conversations go avoided? Why do they go unchecked? It has to do with a fear of discomfort. Confrontation is uncomfortable. It is unpredictable, and it feels out of our control. There is a sense of not being able to control the outcome that keeps people silent. The worry of how the conversation will land and how the person will react on the other side and what the outcome will be is too unknown that it feels too complicated and hard. So what's easier? To avoid it. Press the easy button, act like it's not there, and just keep going. Many leaders and employees feel unprepared for these tough conversations because they fear the fallout. Maybe it's hurting someone's feelings. Maybe they're concerned the conversation will escalate or that it will make things worse. And in fact, many leaders are trained on delivering performance reviews, hiring somebody, firing somebody. But what they're not trained on is how to navigate these essential human conversations gracefully. These are conversations that have to happen in business all the time. They have to happen in your personal life often. They have to happen in your family life often, even in your friendships and communities. And if you can't have those conversations with authenticity at the forefront and with grace and with clarity, then of course you're going to run from them. So what can we do instead? Here's a few strategies that I like for you to consider. One, let's create a culture of openness. Regular feedback shouldn't be reserved for annual reviews. Let's make feedback a continuous two-way conversation. Simple questions like, what is one thing that could improve your experience on this team or in your role or at this company? Can create an environment where people feel comfortable sharing and honestly engaging with one another. I also suggest if you're in a leadership role and you ask your people that question about what could improve their experience, also encourage them to ask you questions as well. What can improve your experience in that relationship or in your role, and get their feedback too. I often facilitate 3 to 4 hour meetings with groups of leaders at different companies. And one of the things that this does is encourages people to lay it all out in the open and to be vulnerable and to grow from being honest and authentic with one another in that room and to focus on topics that they wouldn't normally focus on. You know, every day can't just be about the technical. It can't just be about getting people to do more. Sometimes you have to focus on the people side of what's working and what's not, and kind of get back to grassroots. We're all human beings and we're all adults and we're all there to earn a livelihood. And we can earn more of a livelihood by helping the business grow, which we will do when we help each other grow. It can be a game changer in fostering trust and transparency by having these conversations that are just more about the people side, the human side of being in business. The second thing or strategy to consider is to approach issues with empathy and clarity. Empathy does not mean avoiding hard truths. It's about delivering them with understanding how it may land for the other person. It's also about acknowledging someone's human side while being clear and direct and allowing yourself to address issues constructively. It's okay to have to make business decisions that are hard. That is a reality of what it means to be in business. But you can do that while understanding how it may land for another person. That's perfectly fine. And that's what empathy is. It's possible to hold people accountable while also being respectful of their feelings and circumstances. Business decisions will have to be made regardless of what you feel or what you think the other person will feel. Just be yourself and be human in these tough conversations. Acting like someone you're not, or acting like empathy isn't a real thing, or that you don't need to be human in those conversations, will not make it land better. And it certainly won't make it feel better for yourself afterwards. The third thing or strategy to consider is constructive feedback. Now, when giving feedback, make it about work, not the person. Focus on specific behaviors and outcomes, but don't make it so personal. This can help prevent defensiveness and make the conversation feel like a productive step forward rather than a personal criticism. I also like to lead with something that I'm working on in myself. It immediately makes the conversation feel not like a scolding, but a discussion, and also helps you as a leader seem more relatable. And even if you're not in the leadership position and you're on the receiving side of this, it's really helpful to relate to that person who's delivering the feedback. So find little ways where you can also engage with them, not just be on the receiving end of the feedback. Try things like sharing something vulnerable about yourself. Like, thank you so much for that feedback. I've actually noticed this in myself recently. Or I've actually been thinking about this when it comes to how I work with that team or how I service this client. And the fourth thing that I would suggest is self-reflection. Always check in with yourself regularly. How are you showing up for your team? How are you showing up for yourself? Are there conversations you're avoiding at work? Are you avoiding conversations with a colleague, with a team member, with someone who reports to you, with someone you report to? By being mindful and honest with yourself, you are more likely to stay proactive and address issues early rather than let them blow up and become something bigger than they needed to be. This is critical in leadership. I cannot stress it enough. Self-reflection is imperative. If you're not doing this in your company, you need to start. Self-awareness is a must to creating high-performing teams. And I think that everybody wants that. So avoiding issues might feel like the easy route, but as I've learned, and as you may have experienced already, avoidance does not prevent discomfort. It only delays it. Think of it as a small leak that eventually becomes a flood if left alone. You don't want to do that. At the end of the day, our goal is to foster healthier, more open workplaces. If that's what we're all after, let's take action proactively to do that. Let's make the norm one where we address things head on as they are and value honesty and openness over temporary comfort. This is how we create high-performing, healthier, happier workplaces. So thank you for joining me today. Let's continue to invest in our workplaces by investing in our people. Being proactive in setting these standards and being the example will lead to greater fulfillment and long-term success. Remember, the meaning you seek, the answers you yearn for, they often lie within. I encourage you to follow me at erincoupe.com or AuthenticallyEC on Instagram. Subscribe now so you don't miss a step of our journey together. Until next time, manifest great things.